Our recent episodes of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. have dealt a lot with time travel, and this has inspired a lot of theories and discussions on exactly how is this possible. Basically, is the past fixed or can you change it? Is everything immutable, or with free will and choices can you shape your own destiny? Well, we're going to jump into a couple of theories of the universe to try and answer this exact question. Can you change your future? Coming up next. Hey everyone, D here, and welcome to our little special episode today dealing with time travel. As I said, a lot of theories have gone out there. I've had a lot of talk with a great number of you, and I just sort of wanted to take a moment and sort of back off. Not necessarily deal with any specific theory on what type of events might have occurred that have led up to what the agents are doing, but more along the lines of universal models. What models of the universe can we look at and maybe derive some answers of that about whether or not the past is fixed, kind of like what Fitz thinks, or is it changeable, as we are all certainly hoping that is going to be. Now, one theory of the universe, of course, is that time only moves in one direction, time travel is impossible, and thus all the events that happen in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. this episode, and in most time travel movies, cannot occur. But that actually does nothing to really deal with our narrative standpoint, so we're going to just sort of ignore that and look at, like I said, 4 general models of the universe that do allow time travel and sort of see how things would play out looking at it from those points of view. Now, first off, we have the brick of paper model. And this is actually something that Fitz was referring to throughout the episode when he's talking about that things cannot be changed. And definitely, thanks to blah, blah, blah for your comment and link to a wonderful discussion of what this theory actually breaks down. I will throw a link to that down in the section below for the rest of you. The brick of paper model basically looks at the universe as having all events in time, past, present, future. Everything that is ever going to happen and has happened was laid out initially when the universe was formed. And therefore, nothing within it can be changed. All future events have occurred, all past events have occurred. Any time travel that has occurred is all right because those events have already been pre-established within the timeline. Think of it like watching a movie. You know, you can throw the movie in the DVD player and press play and just move it along at the normal rate of time. But you can also fast forward to future parts of the movie or rewind to parts that you've already seen in the movie. But the movie itself will never change. Everything has already been predetermined for that movie. So no matter times how you watch, how many times you watch Old Yeller, at the end, Old Yeller's gonna buy it. It's just gonna happen. You can tear you up and you can hope every time it's gonna be different. But it's not. Now the advantages of this is basically, since you can't change anything, you avoid any such time paradoxes. The classic, of course, is going back and killing your grandfather. You cannot go back in time and kill your grandfather and thus keep your grandfather from giving birth to your dad and thus stopping you from being born in the first place. Why is that a paradox? Because if you're not born, how can you go back in time and kill your grandfather? Why are you wanting to kill your grandfather anyway? But the point being is, you can't do that. Because you have already been born, the deterministic view of the universe means that if you go back and try and do that, something will occur. Your gun will jam, you'll get tripped, you'll get hurt, something will stop, you'll miss your grandfather, not be able to get to him at the time, or he'll recover fully, whatever. You can't kill your grandfather. You cannot change those events. Why? Because your attempts to kill your grandfather have already occurred in the past. You are simply going back and repeating something that has already happened. Now the downside to this, of course, is that nothing can change, which means that Fitz is right, and the team is going to be caught in this infinite time loop of being brought into the future, sent back into the past, the world is destroyed, and then it goes forward in there until the agents come back in and get sent in the past and repeat over and over again. But the bigger picture, what this means is it's pretty much the end of the MCU, and there's definitely not going to be a season 6 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So for those reasons alone, I think we can toss this theory to the side. The next model we're going to look at is the probability model of the universe. And this tends to focus itself a lot on quantum mechanics. how quantum mechanics deals less with absolutes of Newtonian determinism, but much more on the lines of fuzzy logic and probability and most likely to happen. And in this sense, it means that nothing is determinable. Events will happen to occur based on levels of probability. The most probable aspect is what's most likely going to occur, which leads to the next occurrence, and so on and so on and so forth. Now what this means is that the future can be changed. Things can be adjusted. If you go in and change the probability of any particular moment by the situation, the people involved, the choices that are made, you can alter that probability and thus alter the likelihood of events that are going to occur after that. So, and this basically, this is a theory that gravitates a lot towards what people are thinking about might have been the initial cause of this giant time loop that the agents are going through. Because you can go back in time and change things and adjust, and once you do that, that will change future events. And then if that changes things enough, then the future you could potentially go back in time and adjust it a little bit more. In that case, what we are currently seeing in these episodes of Agent S.H.I.E.L.D. is really the most recent iteration of this repeating time loop. And that when agents are brought into the future, they are remembering what the last iteration of themselves did when they were brought into the past. That is what Robin is remembering, and that's sort of where her memory is locked into. Now that, again, like this means is that while your general events may be the same, specifics may change. Perhaps on the next loop, Max survives and Yo-Yo is killed. Or any type sort of things like that. You can have these small variations and continually moving this loop. Now the downside, of course, of this is because things are changeable, you can create time paradoxes. There is nothing that says that you can't, in this aspect, go back in time and kill your grandfather, thus stopping you from being born and stopping this whole time loop of how would you then be able to go back in time and do this change. Back to the Future deals a lot with kind of this sort of idea of going back in time and interrupt the meeting of the mom and dad, and therefore that means that Marty's never going to be born. It's this whole hand moving thing falling out. And while that tries to deal with the idea of the paradox, it doesn't entirely do it, because even if Marty stops existing, who is it that went back in time and interrupted the meeting of the mom and dad in order for him to not be born? You get into a lot of these odd time paradoxes. Or if we look specifically at the S.H.I.E.L.D., what if one of the iterations, Fitz gets killed? Maybe Fitz goes after the Kree instead of Yo-Yo in some mad bit of rage. And he's killed before he can create the time machine that brings brings all of the agents forward and activates the monolith. Then they would never go forward. They'd never be abducted. There's no reason for Fitz to go into cryosleep and be shifted into the future. So that tends to deal with a lot of problems right there. So it's a good theory. It allows stuff to change, but it also comes with some pretty big downsides. So I think we're going to set that one aside also. Now, with the development of quantum mechanics, there has been another viewpoint of the universe that has changed, and it sort of deals with the whole problem of time paradoxes, and that is the parallel universe theory. And this is a pretty big sci-fi idea we've seen a lot lately. Counterpart that's on Stars with J.K. Simmons right now, that uses parallel universes. Also Fringe from a few years ago on Fox did that. We see in a lot of these where we have an alternate timeline. It's basically looking at the universe is composed of an infinite number of parallel universes, of which everything can be the same or different from where we are now. And any small change or variation exists concurrently with us in a parallel universe. If we're walking to work and we make a right turn instead of a left, that is an idea of two diverging parallel universes. Did you want to have eggs for breakfast, or did you want to have waffles? Did you want to go out last night, or did you want to stay home? All of these exist concurrently. All of these different choices exist concurrently in parallel universes. And how this ties into time travel is anytime you attempt to time travel, you are not moving within your own universe. You are moving into a parallel universe of the same conditions. If I wanted to move myself into the future, I'm not going into the future of this universe. I'm going into the future of a parallel universe where things are mapping out in a general probability of what we might expect. If we go back in time, it does the same thing. I can go back in time and change anything I want and not affect what's happening to me, because it's not happening in my universe, it's happening in a parallel universe. Now, of course, this deals with the whole time paradox concept. Very straightforward. You can go back in time and kill your grandfather because you're not killing your grandfather. You are carrying the grandfather of who would be you in a parallel universe. So you can go ahead and do all that, and that's not going to affect or change you as an individual in any way. And from the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. aspect, we're looking at, in a way, if we break it down into basically 3 parallel universes. We have the universe that the agents were in initially, and they get transported into a new future where the Earth is destroyed and all of that. In that universe, that's a whole new one. That has nothing to do with what we're doing here. But in that universe, there is proof that a 3rd universe had sent people from the future back in time to change the events to try and stop the Earth, and that's when Quake went and disappeared, and the Earth was fractured, and everyone escaped on the Zephyr, and everything was played out as we saw it. So the people that go back in time are not necessarily the same specific individuals, or are not the same Quake, the same Coulson, the same Fitz, the same May, the same Gemma, that were responsible for their back in time. You're basically going from your universe forward into a different universe, and that universe was created because someone else from another parallel universe went back in time and created those events. The question about those first people who went back in time to change those events who were supposed to come up into the future, that's kind of an irrelevant question, because you have so many infinite number of variations. Any possibility could have happened in order to allow that to occur. Now, this deals a lot also with a lot of our theories. They're trying to break down what had happened. You know, was there an initial idea that there's their initial event that occurred that allowed this whole time loop to start to be established and twisted up? Yes and no. You have an infinite number of variations and an infinite number of possibilities, so in some ways it doesn't matter. It just happened. And you sort of have to deal with that. Now that answers, like I said, that deals with a lot of questions. You can go back and forth, you can change things, you can do whatever you want, you can move back forward into the resultant universe of that, and everything is fine. You have no paradox. The downside of that theory, of course, is that you can also never go home. Effectively, once you leave your time frame, it is near impossible to go back to your exact parallel universe, because once you start moving into once you time travel, that's automatically a move into another parallel universe. Yes, there is a small, infinitesimally small chance that you could, if you change everything and got things exactly right as it was in your universe, that you could potentially go back and reinsert yourself exactly where you left. But because there is an infinite number of those universes effectively where all those occurred, the chance of you going into your specific specific universe within that infinite possibilities is pretty close to 0. So while it solves a lot of questions and allows a lot of possibilities of movement, it, you know, kind of has that, I don't know, lost feeling inside. It's not exactly the same. I'm not going back to my universe. Once I travel, I'm always going to be stuck in somewhere else. And you never know if the one that you finally move back into, some parallel universe where Hitler's still alive, and things are not that good. I mean, you never know. That's the problem with parallel universe jumping. So it's a good theory. It answers most of our possibilities, and very likely. But there's one more I want to kind of touch on, and I think this is the kicker. And finally, we have what I'll call the Taffy theory of the universe, which is basically sort of an amalgam of our previous theories. There is a certain structure of the universe in the sense that there are certain events that are meant to happen. But all the kind of particularities in between those moments might be a bit open to interpretation. Think of it like, well, like a piece of taffy, which is all pretty much solid and straight, and it's got its form, but it's mutable, it's changeable. You could alter something and create a little time loop where things are all different from the normal flow of material, but it doesn't change the actual structure. Now this allows, of course, our use of free will to be able to change and adjust things. It gives a certain mutability, kind of like our probability model. However, because there is a certain form to the universe, there's a certain way that things are supposed to happen. There's a naturally corrective instinct. And we see this a lot in time travel movies, where there is certain events that are supposed to happen, but maybe the little things that change in between aren't necessarily important. You don't have to necessarily make a right and have breakfast at 8 a.m. like you do every morning. In order for events to occur, you could still make a left and go to IHOP instead of McDonald's, or a fast food instead of a sit-down restaurant. And that's not really going to change certain things. You could go back in time and kill your grandfather, or try to at least, but perhaps you don't kill him, you just wound him. So he can still be your grandfather. But maybe he won't be the war hero that he was in World War II because of the injury he sustained from your vicious assault. And so that might change certain events to how you grow up. Or it could be that you do kill your grandfather and then you wake up and find out that no, you're not actually your grandfather's grandson. Your grandfather was actually your granduncle who was having an affair with your mom. Or perhaps there was a shore leave that you didn't know about and your mom was able to meet up with, or your grandmother was able to meet up with your grandfather, and that's how they were able to get pregnant and have dad. There's certain immutable changes. There's a general flow to things, but it all sort of lays out. If we look at even Back to the Future, which we've hit on before, when Marty does sort of change things with his dad and he wakes up in the future with a bit more money and a truck and everything like that, that's kind of the idea. The universe has changed a little bit, but the same overall picture. He's still his father's son. He's still enrolled in school, still has the same girlfriend, still knows Doc Brown. None of those things, those larger picture ideas, have changed. So it helps us deal with the idea of time paradoxes because things are naturally going to move and shift away. Either you won't be able to kill your grandfather, or whatever you do is going to mute out and have events to sort of land out in the same sort of idea. Now, it's also possible that you're not important enough in any way and that you can kill your grandfather and just go on because you have no future impact on the rest of the evolution of life. But that's sad. We don't want to talk about this. Now, one of the larger concepts that this sort of theory relies upon is the two-way motion of time. And we know from certain science experiments that there are particles that seem to be able to move backwards in time as well as forwards in time. And because of that, you have the concept of reverse causality. Normally, as we look at time flowing from the past into the future, we have certain events cause the effects of other events occurs. You have a cause and an effect. This things happen and therefore these other things happen. When you look at time moving in both different directions, and the Taffy theory kind of works with this, is that you can have effects creating causes. Because something has happened, whatever happens in the past has to occur in order for that to happen. So what this looks like from an Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. standpoint is when our team is brought into the future where the Earth is destroyed, because that future involves agents going into the past and rescuing Robin and Quake may or may not doing something and going on the Zephyr and living in the lighthouse and all of those events that Robin sees, those events have to occur. Because you have moved into a future that requires these events in the past to occur, the future events cause the events in the past to happen. Because time and energy moves both ways. The exact causality of it becomes entirely irrelevant. And that's kind of like that brick of paper of idea that we had with the first theory, is that events are immutably set once that moment happens. If we look at our time loop, I've already squished up my piece of taffy here, but if we look at our little time loop that happens, and we do this off of the regular timeline, this is a regular timeline, and we create a little boop, little time loop that does things differently. That forms immediately. All events in there happen already. If you move into the future, the past actions have to exist there in order to justify that future going on. So that really allows us to sort of bypass a lot of these necessary causalities. What are the events that happen in order for that to occur? It becomes irrelevant because a future event requires it. That past event has to happen. I know that gets to be sort of a really crazy thing to wrap your idea around, but just think about, like I said, just time flowing backwards. Instead of causes and effects, you have effects and causes. The movie ends this way. Well, the movie has to begin in a certain way in order to go in that direction. That's sort of how it tells. And that gives a lot of support. It avoids a lot of your time paradox situations and questions of how these possible events could have occurred, because they need to occur because they have to for this other event to happen. So there are 4 models of the universe that you can wrap your time-traveling ideas around. Maybe you already knew all those. Maybe we gave you some ideas that will sort of tweak your own theories on what have happened. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was worthwhile and gave you a few little bit of insight. So, thank you so much for joining me on this little discussion. As usual, if you enjoyed this, go ahead and hit the like button, subscribe, check out a couple other videos, you know, make it a day while you're around. Anyway, thanks so much for joining me. I'm D, and I'm out of here. Catch you guys next time. Bye-bye.